Hi everyone, so today is a follow-up to my last video where I did a vlog on my real estate photography and I took you along on some of the jobs that I did and showed you how I take the pictures. Now this is the part where I actually process those pictures. So let's go ahead and get started, but I want to make a couple of notes first that I actually process those pictures using Lightroom 5 and Adobe Photoshop Elements 11, but I have since upgraded as of yesterday to Lightroom Classic and Photoshop CC, the new subscription service. And in terms of workflow, there's not much difference. There's a few differences, but not much difference, and definitely there wasn't much difference in quality. So even the software from 5 years ago did a good job. But functionally, the biggest difference was I can now import the photos natively from my Olympus camera versus when I was using Lightroom 5, I had to convert them to DNG first before I could use them, and DNG being another RAW format. So you can see that's why these files are in DNG. But if you're using Lightroom or any more modern software now, you should be able to import those photos natively into your application. Okay, so here are all of the images I imported. They're all in RAW, and the first thing I do actually is I go into the metadata and I select the flash date, and then I select all the flashes or all the images that had a flash fire. Okay, and once I've done that, I do Control A, I select all of these. Okay, and then I change the color to, or I label them with blue, because intuitively blue to me means flash. All right, let's go back to all images. Now we can see easily or visually, here are the 5 bracketed shots that I did, and then here's 6 more flash shots that I did of the same room. And I kind of overdid it with the flash a little bit because normally there's only 2 or 3 extra flash shots. But in any case, here's the 5 bracketed shots. And you can see that this image has a lot of problems, right? Regardless of which one I select. But let's go back to the first one here. Now, something you didn't see when I was in the vlog was I actually, if you look carefully here, I actually had to bump the exposure up to 1 1/3 stop as my first exposure versus in the settings I normally have it up 2/3 of a stop, and that's because this entire room was so dark on the first shot, or what the camera thought was properly exposed. I didn't want to start with that. So I started at 1 1/3 stop exposure compensation. And even so, you can see the outside is still, obviously blown out. The floors are blown out. The white balance is not bad overall, and I say that because most of the light in this shot is one source from the outside. These interior lamps are having very, very little effect on the lighting inside. So it's not messing up the white balance too much, which is good. But like I said, there really are no good shots out of these 5 bracketed shots. The very brightest. But I don't care about that, okay? All I want to do out of these 5 shots is pick the one, and it looks like this one, that looks like is properly exposed except for the windows, right? I mean, the walls and everything look about right to me. So I'm gonna click 1 star on this one. So I'm going to use this shot in Photoshop. And I don't think I need any of these other ones, but this is why I bracket the shots, is I want to pick one that is about right. And you can see I had to pick the one that was 2 1/3 stop overexposed to get one that I thought looked sort of natural to my eye, okay? All right, now, next thing I want to do is pick a flash shot that looks semi-natural in terms of lighting. And this looks pretty well exposed for a flash shot. Now, yeah, it looks very flashy because look at the harsh shadows, look at, how bright it is over here, and then how dim it gets down here. And when I looked at the back of the screen, I said, oh yeah, this is a little bit too dark. So I went in and I took another picture to try to brighten that up. But I didn't like this one. So I took another one, and this one I like. The back is lit up pretty well. But then this is a little bit too dark over here. So I tried again, and I said, oh, well, now it's too bright over here. So I did one more time, and what I did here is I doubled up the flashes. I put the Nikon flash and the Godox flash together, and now I have enough light. And this is why a lot of real estate photographers, they buy, those 600-watt monolights, right? Because you really need a lot of light sometimes to overpower or to reach everywhere that you want it to reach. So I'm gonna use this one. Okay, and this shot also is going to accomplish what we're going to call the window pull. And this, as I mentioned in a previous video, this is a technique that I learned from Nathan Kuhl. But we're going to use the outside of these windows here when we go into Photoshop, and nothing else. And maybe a little bit of the floor, because if you look at the floor, by using flash, you got rid of all the shine that was on the floor. I mean, there's still some here a little bit, but that's okay. That will look more natural once we get into Photoshop. So let's go back out. So I picked this picture for the natural ambient light. That looks, very pleasing in terms of lighting. I picked this one because now the colors are going to be easier or more accurate to deal with by using flash, because I know what the color of the flash is exactly. I don't know exactly what the color is coming in from inside and then mixing with this light and mixing with this light and mixing with all of the colors that are coming off the walls and the floor. So that's why I use flash, is to make sure that I have one color light on everything. And then I have this shot so I can do work with the windows and possibly pull in or get rid of the shine on the floor. So there's 3 shots. So let's go ahead and select these. And we're going to export these into Photoshop as layers. Okay, so those 3 photos are now here layered on top of each other, and I'm going to arrange these in a way that, and it really doesn't matter which way you layer them so much. But I'm going to layer these in a way that it makes sense to me. So let me see what each of these are. So this shot here, I've turned off these 2, is the ambient light. Okay, so I'm going to move this down. Now this shot here is the natural, the flash shot, okay? And this is the one where the flash shot kind of properly exposed the room. This one I want to be at the bottom, okay? And then all that's left is this one. This is the window shot, right? So I'm going to move this up to the top. Okay, so the reason I do that is because I don't know which pictures I'm going to pick from Lightroom when I come into Photoshop, or what order they'll be in. So I always like to put everything in the same order every time. I like the flash shot with the proper exposure first. And then I like the ambient shot that has all of the natural looking light next. And then I like the correction type things or window shots on top. Now, I'm not going to be able to use these layers as is, because when I turn them all on, you're left with what was on top, the window shot. So I'm going to hide this because I don't want to use that right yet. But I'm not going to hide it. I'm going to just add a mask on top by clicking the Alt key and clicking here. So now that mask is, or that picture is virtually gone. But I'm also going to change this to darken mode. Okay, and let me explain why. Well, I'll come back to it. Okay, I'll explain why I do that. Okay, now this is the ambient shot. I'm just going to add a regular mask to it, but I'm not going to hide. I'm just going to use all of this ambient light, but then I'm going to mask out all of this shine on the floor, and I'm going to mask out the windows so that we can see the outside. But what I don't want from this layer is any of the colors. I only want how natural the light is all around here. So I'm going to change this layer to what they call luminosity right here. Okay, and you can see right away the colors changed. Okay, and they're kind of mixed up, but the lighting hasn't so much, right? Okay, now this last layer is the base layer with the correct colors. So I don't need to change anything here. But let's work with these floors first, okay? So I'm going to use my brush, and the brush is about, I should make it a little bigger. How do you do that? I'm new to this software. Oh, here it is. I'm going to make the brush a little bit bigger. Maybe a little bit more. Okay, good enough. And I have the flow at 10% already, meaning I don't want it to be too strong. So I'm just going to start brushing on the floor here. And I need to use a black brush because this mask is in white. You know, I'm sorry, I'm not a very good Photoshop tutorial. This is actually the first time I'm using the real Photoshop, but it's not that different than the elements I was using. But now you can see me kind of brushing out some of that shine on the floor, right? And this what I'm brushing out, or where it's pulling from, is actually from this first layer, which is this. But this still has a little bit too much shines, but we're going to come back to that. Right now, I just want to kind of get it started. And, okay, not bad. A little bit more here. Okay, what happens if I go up here? Yeah, that brings in a little bit more of the flash shot that's underneath. How about here? Yeah, that looks pretty good. All right. Okay, not bad. It's a little bit blue here, I think. What happened was I actually had a thumbprint on the front of the lens that I think kind of messed up some of the shots. And you'll see that it's a lot more obvious in the next picture I'll do. But I think that's all I need to do here. I can do a little bit here. All right. And you can see I'm bringing this in a little bit, but it's not quite enough. Because what I'm doing is I'm showing, whoops, excuse me. What I'm showing here is what's underneath. Okay, let me go to, and you know, to me that looks a lot better already, right? I got rid of a lot of the shine on this floor. And the lighting all around looks pretty, oops, I want to do that. That looks pretty good. All right. Now let me go to this top layer. Okay, this is the window pull layer. And since this mask is in black, hiding everything, I want to reveal everything. So I'll turn this brush back to white. And I'm just going to start brushing in a little bit here and see how it looks. And that looks pretty good. So I'll go ahead and put this all the way up to 100% and really bring this in. Now you're probably wondering, how is it that I'm brushing this in and not messing up the framing and the curtains and everything else, right? By brushing this in. Well, if you remember, I set this to darken mode right here. So what it's doing is only brushing in what's darker than what's underneath, right? So let me hide this mask and show you. This is why I use the high power flash shot. That if you saw my previous video, I took some very, very bright pictures around the windows, is because I want everything else in the picture to be brighter than a normally exposed shot, which would be what? This one, right? Look how much brighter, whoops, look how much brighter that shot is versus this one. So when I start brushing in, it's only going to bring in what's darker. So let me turn that mask back on. Okay, and turn on my light. All right. But as you can see, we're about 90% there. Let me turn the opacity down a little bit, maybe 50% or 40%, and just, I think the only thing I want to do is maybe bring in this ceiling fan a little better. So let me go back to this mask. I'm going to use a black brush. And yeah, actually I can sometimes I like to zoom in. Where is that? Over here. And go back to my brush. That's a little bit too big, so okay. So let's bring that in a little bit. Use a little smaller brush. All right, good. All right. And let me check this light. That's a bit too much. That's good. Okay. So I am pretty content with that as far as Photoshop goes. The rest I'm going to do in Lightroom. So let's go ahead and save this. I'm going to do Control S to save, and you can see here it's counting down or up. And once that's done, we'll close this and go back to Photoshop. Okay, what I meant to say was go back to Lightroom. Now in Lightroom, let's go back to the metadata. And you can see I now have one Photoshop file here. And let's go ahead and work with this. Now I have, let me develop this one. So I'm going to hit the D. Now I have here is what I call real estate bump, which I kind of copied from, at least the terminology from Rich Baum or Nathan Cool. I'm going to click that, and you can see it's sort of straightened out all the lines. So let me show you what that is. Basically, is it does the lens corrections. It does the transform and auto, which is basically to straighten the lines. And 99% of the time, that works great. I also do some sharpening and some noise reduction and some color noise reduction. Okay, even though I shot these in ISO 200, I like to just add a little bit on top of that, so I don't have to go back and look for it later, because it's not, I'm going to deliver these in 2 megapixels, standard HD files, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, and there's some very, very slight white balance issues here. So if you remember, this is the gray card that I used, the little Glidden paint card. I can just click on this to kind of get the white balance a little closer, but you can see it didn't change very much if you look over here, the overall white balance. And again, the reason being is most of the light in this room, 99% of it is from the outside. So we don't have too much mixed lighting. Even though these are here, these are so weak, relatively speaking, it's not affecting the white balance. Okay, the only other things I would do to this now that I'm in Lightroom is, these corners are a little bit dark. So let me see if I can bump the shadows. And let me bring in some of the blacks a little bit. That's a little bit too much shadow. I can bring some of the highlights down. I'm basically just reducing contrast, right? There's some other settings here that were part of this real estate bump thing. Let's see. Bring the highlights in a little bit more. And let me try and brush in just a little bit. Oops. Let's brighten that up just a little bit, maybe a quarter stop. Oh, not there. Okay, and the floor over here is a little bit, I should have caught that when I was in Photoshop, but just going to darken this a tiny bit, just maybe a quarter stop. Yeah, that's better. And add a tiny bit of warmth to match the floor. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with this shot, and all I would do at this point is flag it with a P or pick. Let's go back to all the files. Just look at it one more time. And there's a little bit of a mistake here, but it's okay. To the untrained eye, oh wait, there is one more thing. Let me go back to develop. Let me get rid of my little white card here with a healing brush. There. Now it's done. And I could crop in a little bit more, but I think this is about 99% of what I delivered to the client. And then all I do is file, export, and when I export this, I'm going to pick the short edge to be 1080. So essentially most of the shots will be 1920 by 1080, give or take, because this is a 4/3 sensor. I didn't shoot these in 16 by 9. But they'll get a minimum 1 megapixel picture, up to maybe 2 megapixels. And this is how it's delivered. Very, very low res. Okay, so let me export that. Let's talk about the HDR for a second. These are the 5 bracketed shots that you would probably use for HDR. And what you would do is you would select these 5, and let me show you what an HDR shot looks like. We'll do Photo Merge HDR. Okay, that's pretty close. Let's go ahead and merge these. And see if there's any hope of getting this to look close to what I had before. So where is it? I think this is it. Yeah. Okay, so you can see the HDR shot. It tried to bring in the windows. but there's still a ton of shine here on the floors, and the room is kind of dark overall. But since we are dealing with a raw file, we can do some work to this. Let me do my same real estate bump to fix the distortion and adjust for, you know, the verticals and things. And obviously this is underexposed, so let's bring this up to what, you know, looks about right. But now I've blown out the windows, right? So I'm going to try and bring the highlights down, bring the shadows all the way up. And then I can bring this back down just a hair. And that's not too bad. And let's see if we can get the white balance about right by clicking that gray card. And what I can do here is try and reduce the highlights in the windows. And it's a little bit too blue compared to the rest, so I'm going to warm this up slightly. Okay. And then let me see if I can do the same on the floors. But yeah, they're too far gone, honestly. Because if I try to bring the exposure down, you can see what that does, right? I could probably eventually get it there, but look, if I do too much, yeah, the windows look good, but then the floors are just ridiculous. But there's a little bit of room there. I'll bring it down just a hair. Let me do a different brush where I actually bring the highlights down. But now you can see the problem I'm having is I'm making the window frame and the curtains too dark. So actually I don't want to use this. But essentially that's an HDR shot, right? That's probably the best we can do. And let me get rid of this card there. And if you remember the previous real estate photographer's picture, he probably did he or she, I should say, did a HDR shot because this looks a lot like the one he took or she took, other than they didn't have as wide an angle lens. They had framed it something more like this. And I think that's pretty much what the other shot looked like. Okay, let's just run through this one pretty quickly. The next shot, basically, what I want to demonstrate is why I don't use HDR, even when the lighting's not that extreme, okay? So let's go down to this one shot down here. I think this is it. Yeah. Okay, you can see this is the shot where I took 5 bracketed shots and then I created an HDR and it just like I did before. And this doesn't look bad, right? The only thing I need to do here is blot out my little white card. But the problem I'm having here, and if you look closely, I don't know if doing this helps, but if you look closely, you'll see that this lamp looks kind of yellow, this one looks kind of blue. There's some blue on the wall here, there's a little bit of a green tint here. There's a blue tint, greenish tint in here. And then over here, you know, you have all kinds of things. You got a blue room in here, kind of a purple room here, yellow here, but you get the idea, right? Even with HDR, there's no way to correct the white balance all over this picture without spending, you know, several days on it. You could eventually get there, I suppose, but basically speaking, I think as an HDR shot, this doesn't look bad, but the color is all over the place. And real estate photography is a very mild form of product photography, because what are you doing? You're trying to present a product and you want the colors to be accurate. Now, they don't have to be as accurate as, say, a real product photography of some merchandise, but it needs to be better than this, and HDR just doesn't deliver. And to the untrained eye, I think most real estate agents would be fine with this picture. They're like, oh, that's great. But when you compare it to, say, my shot here, where I did all of that Photoshop blending, um, you can see the colors here are much more accurate. Because this room, the wall is painted the same color as this wall. When you look at this picture, it looks like it's tan versus gray versus maybe this is a blue room, this is a purple room. But at least in this picture, you can see that all of these rooms are most likely the same color, right? And you can see the yellow cast off this light is much reduced. You can still see a little bit of difference between these two, but not as much. This picture still looks a little cool to me now that I have it here. I think that's mainly because I'm on a different monitor now to do this screen recording that's not calibrated. So probably on a calibrated monitor, this would look accurate to me, because when I'm looking at it now, it looks a little bit blue. But in any case, what I'm really trying to demonstrate is why I don't use HDR and why I use flash to take pictures for real estate. Okay, well, that's pretty much it. So thanks again for watching, and I hope that you found this helpful. I'm sorry I'm not very good at doing Photoshop tutorials, but check out Nathan Cool and Rich Baum's videos on how to do window pulls and flambient and all the techniques that I learned, I got from them to do real estate photography. So big thanks to them if they're watching this. But if you guys have any questions for me, I'll do my best to answer them. So just leave them in the comments below. But I appreciate you guys watching, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.